What is going on with Fallout 76? The game right now finds itself in a pretty perplexing state, where new content is being added. There's literally a new update earlier this week, and the big summer update dropped not that long ago, and yet as you actually play the game, it's honestly kind of hard to find some of this content. We get a look at the future, we get to see new support studios coming on, and even the next big update with Expeditions, which has been years in the making, and we get a more full picture at what Expeditions will entail, and I have a lot of thoughts on all of that. So in this video, I want to recap and give my opinions on what's going on with Fallout 76 and just kind of get you up to date with the status of the game. But as you'll see with these updates, you're going to be spending a lot of time waiting for events to spawn or even just on load screen server hopping. So you'll probably want today's video sponsor, Mech Arena. It is the perfect game for those who want that tight, fast-paced, but competitive shooter gameplay. All throughout my day, I have gaps to fill, whether it be for games to launch and load screens or even just on the toilet, and Mech Arena has just become my go-to game to just not be bored, as the matches here are quick and action-packed. You can have a game be over in under 5 minutes. Along the way, you're going to be encountering all kinds of different mechs with a whole set of different customization options, and it's definitely not a reflex shooter. Weapons range from automated artillery barrages to shotguns, which feel perfect on these maps that are built for fast action tactics and constant encounters. And there's a ton going on right now in-game. A new mech named Orion that can highlight an enemy for your entire team to see, as well as Battle Pass Season 8 where you can get some epic new skins as well as a ton of other goodies. The best part is Mech Arena is completely free to play on both Android and iOS right now, so you could use my personal link or scan the QR code on screen to get a free starter pack. This being worth $25, and you'll get a Firelight skin, a Prodigy crate, a Plasma Cannon 4, so you'll get a proper jumpstart. And you could even add me in game right now so we could play some matches together. Looking back at Fallout 76, it just recently got its big summer update, which honestly is fairly fun. It brings 3 new events to the game, and these are some of the best events the game has pretty much ever gotten, but definitely gotten in a long time. Test Your Metal has been previewed for the better part of a year, so you've probably seen this at some point. It's basically this robot gladiator arena hosted by some Brotherhood of Steel members who are doing research on robots, and similar to many other Fallout 76 events, you fight some baddies while trying to keep some allies alive. Overall, it's pretty simple, but I think the theme makes it a bit more fun and interesting. Moonshine Jamboree has an even more fun theme. You're protecting and helping run a moonshine operation in Appalachia. Waves of enemies will attack you while you have to protect the stills and even harvest valuable acidic venom to help make even more moonshine. And this moonshine is a new item. You could actually find a few bottles here for yourself if you'd like to. Moonshine Jamboree is another event that's pretty simple conceptually. You've probably played this exact thing before in Fallout 76. It's just this time it has a different skin, and the theme and the skin of this one is particularly interesting, compelling, and fun. And lastly, what is probably the best of the 3 new events is Eviction Notice. Radiation has kicked out a bunch of settlers from an area, and we are tasked with protecting a newly implanted rad scrubber from waves of attacking super mutants. Honestly, I think the reason this event is far funner than the other 2 is it's actually more difficult. The event has consistent high-level enemies spawning to attack you, to the point where I would actually argue this could be the best way to farm legendaries in-game right now, or at least when it pops up, you should do it, if only to farm legendary items. And it has this interesting layout where enemy super mutants basically spawn on the high ground, and you must defend as they attack from all angles. Definitely more on the challenging side, but not too hard, and overall it just constantly felt like there was something to do, which is not something I could say for all of these events. And this event does kind of feel like a payoff moment with some of the past and other changes coming with this update. During an event now, you don't actually have to hit legendary enemies to loot them, as well as you actually have things like corpse highlighting, so you could see which corpses have a legendary item, or even just area looting, so you could loot a ton of things at once. And those changes that have somewhat come in the past and some with this update made the looting phase of this event a lot more enjoyable. And although none of this is particularly bad, that really is the whole update. That is the new content, and that's all the new content we're getting for a while. Like, yeah, there are a variety of other bug fixes and even some new bugs added with this one. On release, it did break the Scorchbeast Queen drops, so the Scorchbeast Queen wasn't giving loot to players. That was fixed quickly thereafter, but since Fallout 76 is battling this identity of each update being 1 step forward and 2 steps back, having major bugs like that slip in is definitely not helping. The other issue with this update is these 3 new events just aren't all that interesting from a comprehensive gameplay standpoint. Just about everything else in the game is exactly how it was before. So though the 3 new events are fun, you're gonna rarely see them. They're in the event pool now, so there's gonna be a ton of other events popping up up the vast majority of the time, and you'll just see them from time to time. If you want to actually play the new events specifically, you'll spend the better half of your day server hopping around trying to find them, because the vast majority of the time it's old events. So the way I would describe this update is it's great new content that'll occupy your time for about 10 minutes at a time, and then you're just left with the same old Fallout 76 where very little has changed. And this is the big summer update. This is all of the content for the summer season. And one of the other big issues with Fallout 76 that neither the latest update or this past big summer update addressed are legacy weapons. In Fallout 76, there are weapons that used to be able to spawn, but no longer can. This typically being energy weapons with the explosive effect, and as a result of a weird interaction, they are incredibly powerful. And just recently, Bethesda buffed energy weapons in general, so inadvertently made these specific legacy weapons even more powerful, to the point where they're just ridiculous. I actually had a moment where I joined a Scorchbeast Queen fight, and the Scorchbeast Queen was taken out by somebody with a legacy weapon before I could even spawn in. So I got nothing, no loot, no items, because they killed it that quickly before I could even get through the load screen of teleporting there. And to be clear, I clicked on the event right after it spawned. And this is an issue exemplified by some of these events, because you'll have somebody using a legacy weapon, standing from a good vantage point, and just one-shotting basically everything. So you get to the point where you can't even really fire or get a hit off on enemies because they're being killed so quickly. This has been an issue with Fallout 76 for years, and now there are some talks of Fallout 76 getting a more comprehensive balance pass overall. And reportedly, a precursor to this may be addressing legacies so they don't become more out of control. And this will be great, but it's definitely coming too late. Even if this update dropped tomorrow, this has been an issue with the game for literal years, not months, years. And at least for me, it's definitely one of the aspects of the game that is taking enjoyment out of it for me. And yes, before you type your angry comment, I do see the irony of complaining about legacies while I do literally use a legacy weapon in the background footage, but in fairness, mine is under-leveled, and let's be honest, I'm not killing anything that quickly. I know though I'm talking about legacies as a whole, it's really explosive Gatling plasmas dealing ridiculous amounts of damage in an area of effect nature that is the big issue. Another update came just earlier this week, and it was basically just a bunch of bug fixes, which is always great to see, but honestly, there's very little of note here. They added in pockets, so now if you assign the deep pocketed mod to some armor sets, it'll actually have pockets on it, or really pouches, that's how they are visually represented most of the time. It doesn't work with every single armor, but it's still kind of a cool little nice change to see. A past update introduced a bug where energy weapons broke absurdly fast, and now a couple of months after that bug was added, it has been fixed with this update. And even more impressive, they fixed a 2-year-old bug where the Settler Forager does not give daily quests. Now it'll actually give daily quests. This is one of those allies added with the Wastelanders update. On release, it would only ever give one quest or no quest at all, and then no more, even though it's supposed to give you a quest every day. And now it'll actually give you a quest every day. And one of the most interesting things data mined around this update are battle banners, which seem to be a new thing coming to the game. This will seemingly be a score-related item, so a new reward you can get for doing the battle pass if that's your thing. And it's basically going to be an item you can use that will give you certain bonuses, like increasing your damage dealt, giving you a chance to heal yourself when you take out an enemy, or even a chance to repair your weapons and or armor when you take out an enemy. They're basically more aggressive and stronger versions of lunchboxes. I mean, getting a damage bonus is pretty powerful, and it's likely going to be an additional incentive for people to complete the scoreboard, because they are just much more strong than a lot of the other aid items in game. And I wouldn't be shocked if they make their way onto the Atomic Shop in the future, although at least as of right now, there's no evidence of that. But let's be honest, it's basically how it's worked with all of these other items, so it'll probably happen with this one too. But okay, that's a now. How about looking ahead? Bethesda also just recently updated the public test server, and in this they added the second expedition to the broader Expeditions update. Expeditions being the big new update that'll finally take us off map in Fallout 76, back to the pit. The way this will be formatted is, as you actually do the expeditions, you'll have to pick one mission or another. Each of these will be in completely separate world spaces. This second world space for the new mission is gorgeous. The first mission's world space looked amazing, and this one continues to look amazing. I actually found the world space overall to be some of the best looking cityscape content we've had in a while for a Fallout game, but it'll also transition into some swampy areas infested with enemies, and even does have an interior enclosed section. The actual expedition is also pretty simple. You start off by talking to some guy to get your orders. From there, you're going to have to clear some gunk out of some pipes, then you're going to attack some bad guys in the tunnels, clearing out several of them, and finally, you're going to defend that same guy from the start as he looks through some bookshelves. And there's even a bit of a boss fight at the end to finish things off. It is a familiar and pretty fun mix of exploring around, fighting enemies, and holding down points, trying to defend certain areas. The enemies here being pretty interesting. Trogs are back from Fallout 3, and with this update, a variety of new Trogs were introduced, which is always great to see, more enemy diversity. Some of these are particularly horrifying. And the new enemies with this are the Fanatics. These are these Raider-esque bad guys. They're basically just generic Raiders. But with this new mission, they actually gave them power armor, which if you're like, what? In Fallout 3, the power armor was more of just a regular armor. But in Fallout 76 and Fallout 4, it's more of a suit of armor you jump into, and it's much bulkier. Well, during these expeditions, you'll notice that a lot of the enemies, the Fanatics specifically, will actually have power armor pieces as regular armor, as basically a callback to how things worked in Fallout 3, since you are in the pit from Fallout 3. It's kind of small, you may not even notice it. At the end of the day, it is just another armor type, you can't get it for yourself, but it looks really cool, and I thought it was a really nice addition overall. And similar to the first expedition, there's some optional stuff to do here also, like getting some collars from bodies, trying to persuade a bad guy, and even saving people from a radstorm. I didn't save them. Honestly, I didn't care all that much. Overall, I found the second expedition to be a huge upgrade over the first. It was a lot more fun and a lot less tedious, and I think the enemies looked and felt genuinely cool to play against. And this expedition actually gets a bit into the darker side of Fallout. You have prisoners being used as laborers, and it did a lot more to establish the pit as a place of suffering for many, which I personally really enjoyed. There still isn't much lore going on here, but the world building they did, as little as it was, I did appreciate. But once things are over, you just kind of leave. Although it was a bit more fun, it still lacks that substantialness that I was hoping expeditions would bring, or even the novelty. The gameplay loop here, although you're doing things in a new place, is kind of the same. You're basically just still playing Fallout 76 and doing those familiar actions. It's more fun and basically a more interesting daily op, or at least that's my interpretation. You're in a better location with new and interesting enemies, but at the end of the day, you're just running around shooting things. There's not really a whole ton of lore or new twist-ups on the gameplay here. And overall, I feel like Fallout 76 just finds itself in a very weird spot right now. The past update and the future one with expeditions are fun enough. The new experiences are enjoyable, but are they enjoyable enough to jump back into the game? I don't really know about that. If you're already not playing the game, I don't really see anything in either of these updates that will draw you back in. Just recently, there was a report put out on some of the problematic practices done internally and partially what led to the Fallout 76 launch disaster. This being an article put out by Kotaku where they talked to 10 former employees who worked on Fallout 76. The report details the very rough working conditions given to QA during development, and really some of the developers overall. This led to some senior devs leaving the company and even some people developing health issues. It mentions how, to get Fallout 76 done, developers needed to be borrowed from other projects like Redfall and Starfield. It mentioned some broader issues with direction with Fallout 76 and how Todd Howard was really focused on Starfield and would occasionally fly over to the Fallout 76 devs to crap on ideas and then go back to Starfield. And even more explicitly, as the game increased in size and scope, no additional time was ever really given for testing. A full pass of this huge multiplayer game with multiple expansions, QA got 3 days in a good week. It was 1 day if production issues resulted in a late build being delivered. And reportedly, some of the employees with multiplayer dev experience pointed out major issues during production that should have been addressed, but these weren't tackled until after the bad launch reviews, with one person claiming that all of the launch bugs for Fallout 76 were already known by QA before launch. And this article paints this picture of Fallout 76 being a black sheep of sorts at Bethesda. Now, numerous employees from a high level to a low level wanted nothing to do with the project, with fundamental issues around the engine itself also being present, and reportedly sometimes just updating the build would break things altogether. There's a lot more in this article, and I'll have a link to it down below if you want to check it out for yourself, but I feel like this is one of those things you have to look at carefully. I would imagine good chunks of this are true and representative, but in particular with the last 2/3 of the article, they start getting into some claims where it's only backed up by one source or two sources at a time, where the start of the article is more backed up by several people. There's 10 interviewed employees. It's one of those things where it feels like a lot of this is definitely true, but you also have to imagine that there's a second side to this story. We're only really getting one half of it, as Bethesda didn't comment on any of this. And with some of the things in this article, it doesn't even have to be speculative, as you could see the same things still going on, as the mismanagement of Fallout 76 almost seems perpetual, and a lack of QA time seems to remain. Somehow, updates in 2022 are still shipping with major broken features, like the rewards of the most popular event in the game not working, with with your major event update. That's kind of a big deal, and although things are fixed now, it just feels like that probably shouldn't be a problem anymore. The game should have matured past this, but it hasn't. Even further, the direction of the game is just bizarre to me. One of the massive updates last year was Fallout Worlds, which as far as I can tell was dead on arrival. It has barely anyone playing it, and barely anyone played it on release. Not to say nobody does, I still actually regularly use that. There's some awesome creations coming out of Fallout Worlds, but as far as a massive content update, the vast majority of the audience for this game wants very little to do with Fallout Worlds and barely uses them. It made sense to use Fallout Worlds as a stepping stone to mod support, but it doesn't seem like mod support's coming at any point in 2022, which would mean that it'll be about a year and a half after Fallout Worlds at the earliest that mod support actually comes, which makes me scratch my head even more as to why this was added. And even looking at the other content coming in 2022, new events are great, expeditions are fun, but all of this content just feels a bit lackluster. The game needs a more fundamental change up, and there's really nothing on the 2022 roadmap that looks like it's going to entail that. With that said, the future definitely does have some hope for Fallout 76. As I mentioned earlier, there is talks of a balance pass coming, which would be great, actually changing up the meta, making things feel fresh and different. Double 11 was brought on as a support studio earlier this year. We've actually seen several popular modders in the community hired by Double 11 to work on Fallout 76, which is always great news. These are the guys that seem to be working on the Nuka World on Tour content coming later this year. And overall, Fallout 76 is just kind of in an odd spot right now. I bet there's a lot of people who could have not played the game for the past year can jump back in and have a hard time noticing what's actually different. There's a couple of new events, a new game mode with Fallout Worlds, but the vast majority of the game is exactly the same. Hopefully this starts to change in the future. Maybe more support studios will mean a content ramp up. It doesn't seem like there's any other Fallout games coming out anytime soon, so this is really all we have. With that said though, hopefully you guys found this video informative or interesting overall, but with that, I thank you all again for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.